Hey, so today I want to talk about a critical component of any AP exam or AP course, which is primary source documentation, either on your multiple choice or on your extended essays. Some of you may be struggling to get all those points in your essays or to narrow down to a single answer in your multiple choice because some of those answers look like they're quite plausible, and by the time you hit AP level, hey, if you were like me, you could talk your way into pretty much most answers. So what we're going to do today is talk about taking it way back to basics and starting with your W's for your primary source documentation. This works for both text documents as well as those images that sometimes astound us. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about our basic approach, which should be like a T-chart like this. By the time you get to your AP exams, you should be doing this in your head or in quick jotted notes, but for practice, you need to be writing it out like this. Your first level thinking is your who, your when, your where, and your what. And of course, it's history, you gotta have a when. Who is being represented? Who is your audience? When is this happening? When is a big deal. I know, like, we think history, names and dates. And if you're anything like my husband, he was like, I hated history. It was like the worst subject ever. And I assure him it's because he didn't have me as a teacher. It would have been so much better. Because history, honestly, is like a great big telenovela. It's all crazy once you get into it. But the when gives you context. It gives you understanding into the mindset of the people. It gives you understanding into the issues of the time. Super important. Where? Also, context. Big deal. If your political cartoon is published in the United States, it's going to have a very different slant and meaning and audience than it would have in Europe or in Asia or in Latin America or in Africa or Australia. You got to get all the continents in there. What? What is being represented? What is the message? Again, all of this is a little easier to do in a text primary source. So the example I'm going to use today is a visual primary source. You've got to get through these basics to get your basic points on your essays and to kind of narrow out and remove some of those obvious answers on your multiple choice. Once you do this side and you have your first look at your primary source, then you're able to move on to the why. Why is potentially the most important question in the English language. Just ask any 2-year-old. The sky's blue. Why? We have to go to bed now. Why? But that is the voice that needs to be in your head. When you look at a primary source, when you look at a political cartoon, why am I looking at this? Why did they publish it? Why is this important for the time? Why was this relevant? This is where you get those extra points in analysis. This is where you get to that deeper level of comprehension and critical thinking. But you've got to get your base level first and then move on to your deeper level thinking. So in the comments section, not the comments section, excuse me, in the description, you will find a link to a primary source. This is to history.org. They do a primary source of the month, which is a great tool to use when you're practicing for an AP exam. In this particular primary source, we're going to quickly talk about our who, our when, our where, and our what. Who's being represented? We have, very obviously, the White League, the Ku Klux Klan. We have slaves, and that is our who being represented. It is also, obviously, a political cartoon, so it was published, so our audience is probably literate, because there's writing on it. But our audience is at a time period where not everyone's literate, so it's important to convey information in images. And then we have our when. Well, even though slavery is being represented, the Ku Klux Klan and the White League put it in a slightly different chronological era. So when you look at it and it says worse than slavery, it means we're hearkening back to a previous idea, which means we're probably not dealing with slavery, but a reference to it. And if we're dealing with a race issue, we're probably dealing with the civil rights era. That gives us context in our when. Where? Well, it's in English, so we know we're in the English-speaking world. Important key factor. Above, you can see an eagle, and you see the Union as it was. Yep, you guessed it, a reference to the United States. An eagle's always a pretty good giveaway. So we're talking about the civil rights movement in the United States. Again, where gives us context. It allows us to give insight into our whys. And our final, what is being said? As you can see here, this is probably not a pro-slavery or pro-segregation political cartoon, so we're looking at probably a liberal publication, someone probably from the North, because it villainizes various Southern organizations. So we get our whats. What is being said? They are saying that the current treatment of African Americans is worse than slavery. So these are all the things we would jot down on this side. But to get over to our whys, to get those extra points, to make sure we are at the right answer on our essays, we need to get into our why. Why is this being represented? Because it's a hot button topic at the time. This is the model I want you guys to make. Do your whys, and we would discuss this next lesson.